Pete Buttigieg comes out and tells us that the California gas car ban is interesting, making a small suggestion that this actually might happen in the rest of the country. So we'll talk a bit about that, what that means, and what that could mean for you and your family. In other news, Katie Hobbs has released an anti-school choice plan, knowing full well that she was a private school graduate. So we'll be talking about that. John Fetterwoman comes out with probably the cringiest statement that I've heard in a long time in politics, and he tells us that he is John Fetterwoman. Somewhere out there, there's a speechwriter that looked at that, watched him say that with a little smug look on his face, said, "Yeah, I wrote that. Yeah, that was a great idea." But we'll go over some of that and where this goes. And Chris Cuomo slams Democrats for demonizing everybody who voted for Trump, knowing full well that he was a person who demonized everybody who voted for Trump. It is going to be all this and more. Welcome back to the backup channel. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Man, there's just some times where you want to go out and mute a thread over on social media. Well, it actually happens quite a bit for me. Because, really honestly, you haven't participated in the conversation for at least 20 tweets, but you've just got two people who are on opposite sides, one of whom claims to be an independent, and I know better than that. But you've got two people on opposite sides of the situation who just do nothing but go back and forth overnight, all through the day. You look back, and again, on a conversation that you had nothing to do, or that you had something to do with, one of the two participants commented on something that I had posted organically, not something that I had commented on somebody else's post. Just found the picture of the shaking fists old man, decided she wanted to weigh in on it, and here we are 2 days later with, every time I walk away from Twitter, I come back to 20 notifications. I've replied intermittently here and there for that, but really honestly, it's just two people going back and doing the government's bidding, honestly. And that's the worst part of it. It's with the protests. After the Rittenhouse trial, with no protests, with as much tension that was going on after the Rittenhouse trial, that's where I started to figure out that, this is not really an organic thing. Even the BLM, the police and justice stuff, it's not an organic thing. I knew that the Capitol Selfie Fest wasn't an organic thing. I've known that for quite a while, just because, when you take the fight to the government, it's typically not organic people trying to take the fight to the government. It's typically the FBI trying to entrap people, especially when you take it out to the most secured building in the country, with National Guard, Capitol Police, FBI, CIA, all roaming around the same streets as you. That's typically not a good idea, and most people typically understand that. So I knew that one wasn't organic, but, with the Loyola case over in Michigan and the Rittenhouse case in Kenosha, after the trial, rather, on the Rittenhouse side of things, where they could barely muster up any sort of protest, that's kind of where I knew. But none of this was organic. This is all perpetrated by the same people, trying to keep us out at each other's throats. So these two people are going back and forth with that. I'm sure that throughout the course of this program, I'm going to have at least 5 to 10 other notifications popping up over here. And I got a couple tweets that we'll look at, and we'll see. They're a little bit further down, but that's enough about my gripes with social media. I did meet most of you through social media, so it's got a plus side as well. Let's get started. Let's get into it. Before we do, make sure you guys go check out great programming such as the Daily Ignoramus, the Breakdown with Birkenhoff, the Art Conservative, the Porch Boys. Go check out PJ Patriot, KTZed, Tweets by Brit. Go check out Mr. Behavior, the No Gimmicks podcast. A lot of great people out there who have the same idea, trying to bring the news to the common man from the common man. A sort of a way of getting around the people who wear suits that cost more than our houses in some cases. So definitely go and check all of them out. It's going to be a great time. They are great friends. I very much enjoy all of them, but we have got to get out of this and get into the news for the day. Starting in with the Dow, looking in at that. The Dow marked its fourth straight day up of trading right now, bringing ourselves back up to 32,381.34 throughout the day yesterday. It's of course reset because I spent way too long looking for a hairbrush and then too long talking about what's happening over on my Twitter. So there is that. But yes, looking in at the numbers here, it does look like we had another day where everything spiked up and then just sort of stayed up throughout the rest of the day here. So it's looking like it's interesting to look at some of this and some of the honk, I think, just because of the timing of everything. I mean, coming out through the summer, it was nothing but bad decision after bad decision where it was out there and causing the Dow to drop, coming back briefly below 30,000 once again. And it's the same with Bitcoin right now. And it does make me wonder if there are certain actors who are out there who are going out and buying things just to make the Dow look good. So we can come in and say, hey, look at the recovery we had in the Dow. Go vote for Democrats in the midterms. It's the same with the Bitcoin. Hey, look, that's going to be coming back here. All your 401ks look great right now. Go and vote for Democrats. And the same with the fuel, which is hurtling its way back downward. But even Yellen's looking at this right now and saying, yeah, I don't know if this is going to happen. I don't know if this is going to stay like this or if we might get another spike. But we will continue to watch the Dow and see what happens with that. Looking in at your Bitcoin. Bitcoin is sitting at 22,618 US dollars even. That is up on today. Up 216 US dollars and 60 US cents, or just shy of 1%. Bringing this back out to the 5-day and seeing what happened throughout the day yesterday, it still seemed to be on a steady climb, which started all the way back on the 9th. It shot itself up once on the 9th, and then it just started steadily, easily climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. It did look like it took a little bit of a tank here today. Let's actually get a refresh and see if there was something that I missed. Oh, yeah, it did just tank. Probably within the last hour. It tanked out hard. So, yeah, looking at this, now we're down to 655.60. So now it's on a loss of well over 3%. So I guess we will continue to watch this and see what happens with that and see where it went yesterday. Looking at your fuel. Gas is holding steady in the Madison area, $3.19 all the way across. Everywhere that you can get gas in Madison area looks to be all in the same price. So a little bit of relief coming down here. I do have to wonder. Now, there are a couple things that are going to weigh up on this and a couple things that are going to weigh down on this. Number one, the midterms are coming, so anything that they can do to get the billionaires out there that are donating to them to squeak out a few cents back out of the gallon, they're going to do. I don't know if we can get back below $3 a gallon before Election Day, coming up here in November. And one of the things that's going to weigh up on this is it's going to start getting cold at some point here, which means more demand for fuel because, you know, when you're going out and warming up your truck before you go to work, that does take more fuel, much more fuel. So we have that, plus vehicles are typically not as efficient in the winter, so more demand on the fuel for that. But you can also go out and do the ethanol, so that might weigh it back down too. So there are a few things. I actually have no prediction as to where gas is going to be, because before Election Day, I can see a scenario where it's back up to $3.60, and I can see a scenario where it's $2.75. So we'll have to come back and see and watch this and watch where it goes every single day as we go. I am leaning towards the $2.75 mark over the $3.60 mark. Full disclosure. But I could easily see both scenarios before November. Let's see what IBD has to say for the morning. From Investors Business Daily, Dow Futures rally ahead of key inflation data from Scott Latonin. Oh, the advertisement's going to come early. Dow futures rallied 200 points ahead of Tuesday's key inflation reading, the Labor Department's Consumer Price Index, or CPI. We actually should be able to jump over and see that. We'll see when we get down to the futures on the day. EV leader Tesla rose 0.5% Tuesday. Among the Dow Industrials, tech titans Apple and Microsoft were both higher ahead of today's stock market open. In the market's current volatility, Arista Networks, DoubleVerify, Palo Alto Networks, and Pure Storage, as well as Dow Jones stock Chevron, are among the top stocks to buy and watch. Keep in mind, the market's increased volatility is a good reason for investors to be more defensive, although recent gains are constructive. DoubleVerify is an IBD leaderboard stock. Pure Storage is an IBD swing trader stock, while Chevron and Palo Alto were featured in this week's Stocks Nearby Zone column. Before the opening bell Tuesday, the Dow futures rose 0.65 versus fair value, while the S&P gained 0.7. The Nasdaq futures traded up 0.7 in morning trade. Remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. Among ETFs, the Nasdaq Invesco QQQ Trust rose 0.8%, and the SPDR S&P 500 gained 0.7 in early trade. The 10-year yield ticked lower to 3.31% early Tuesday. On Monday, the 10-year yield notched its highest closing level since June 15th. U.S. oil prices continue to rebound, climbing 1.4 on Tuesday. West Texas Intermediate traded back to $89 a barrel. The Labor Department's CPI inflation rate is due out Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Consumer prices are expected to fall 0.1 in August versus the previous month. Inflation is expected to rise 8.0 in August from a year ago. The Producer Price Index, which measures wholesale inflation, will be out on Wednesday. Let's have a look. CPI report live updates. U.S. inflation remains high in August. From CNBC. Let's have a look. Impromptu. Inflation rose 0.1 in August, so expectation. Fall 0.1. Reality. Rise 0.1. Inflation rose 0.1% in August, even with a sharp drop in gas prices. From Jeff Cox. Inflation rose more than expected in August, even as gas prices helped give consumers a little bit of a break. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported on Tuesday the Consumer Price Index, which tracks a broad swath of goods and services, increased 0.1% for the month and 8.3% over the past year, excluding volatile food and energy costs. CPI rose 0.6% from July and 6.3% from the same month in 2021. Economists have been expecting headline inflation to fall 0.1% and core to increase 0.3%, according to the Dow Jones estimates. The respective year-over-year forecasts were for 8% and 6% gains, respectively. Energy prices fell 5% for the month, led by a 10.6% slide in the gasoline index. However, those declines were offset by increases elsewhere. Just like what it was last month when they said, "We beat inflation at 0% inflation." That's exactly the same situation that's going here. Yes, we're seeing the energy prices fall, but that is going to be a honkening. That is probably going to come back to bite us in the behind because they didn't address the root of the problem. They just tried to flood the market with energy that we really didn't need to be flooding the market with. But because everything else is outpacing, and we looked at the chart of individual prices on the CPI, everything else is outpacing. So when we had 0%, it was actually because of a massive decline in energy costs, but everything else was still rising. Again, yes, we see another 5% drop in energy prices, but everything else is rising in a way that's not sustainable. I'm glad I don't have to drive an hour for work anymore. Because if I did, I would be screwed. But I'm still feeling it on everything else that I have to go and buy. Let's see, the food index increased 0.8 in August, and shelter costs, which make up about a third of the weighting on the CPI, jumped 0.7 and are up 6.2% from a year ago. Medical care services also showed a big increase, rising 0.8% on the month and 5.6% from August of 2021. New vehicle prices also rose, increasing 0.8%, though the used vehicles fell 0.1%. Markets slumped following the news, with futures tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average down nearly 350 points after being higher earlier. So this information that we have here is not accurate anymore. Interesting. I wonder what it's at now. Well, I guess we'll have to see as we go throughout the day, but yeah, that's what we'll see off of that. That's interesting. I kind of like how they put the automotives into it. Or was it? Yeah, there we go. New vehicles rose, increasing 0.8, although used vehicles fell 0.1. A part of that is going to be the fact that, number one, on new vehicles, we've still got people waiting on orders that they made when the economy was still good. But when you're looking at a situation like what we're seeing here with used prices falling, I know people, it's easier for them with a high interest rate to get an affordable interest rate on something that's brand new because it'll hold its value for longer. Fewer chances, and there's still always a chance, but fewer chances for there to be a massive breakdown or for the vehicle to be taken out of service. And if it does, there's a warranty off that, whereas with used vehicles, there can still be a warranty, but not as much. So going out and doing a discretionary buy of a used vehicle versus a new vehicle, I mean, the new vehicle is always going to be more advantageous unless you're somebody like me who doesn't want to be a new vehicle owner ever in my life. And people are, counting their chickens and saying, okay, what's going to give me the best bang for my buck right now? If I put myself a little bit further in the hole, I'll have something that'll be more reliable for longer. Whereas if I just leave that used vehicle sit on the lot, it'll just sit there and collect dust. And we are starting to see some of that in some of the dealerships around town as well. So that's what we have coming off of that. Let's talk about gas just a little bit more, which was going to be my second finance article, and then we will get into the main news of the day. From the Daily Wire. Well, it's a risk. Janet Yellen admits gas prices could spike again this year. From Ben Ziesloft. Treasury Secretary Yellen noted on Sunday that there remains a risk of gas prices spiking again this year. Europe is presently grappling with an energy crisis emerging from a limited oil and natural gas supplies due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In an interview with CNN anchor Dana Bash, Yellen indicated that the situation could also lead to higher prices in the United States. Well, it's a risk. And it's a risk we're working on the price cap to try to address, she said. This winter, the EU will cease, for the most part, buying Russian oil. Official prediction. I think that they're going to go back once it starts getting really cold and go beg for Russian oil. And probably drop sanctions. And in addition, they will ban the provision of services that enable Russia to ship oil by tanker. And it's possible that that could cause a spike in oil prices. The national average price of gasoline was $2.38 per gallon when President Biden assumed office and increased to $3.53 by the start of the Russian invasion. After surpassing $5 a gallon in early June, prices have subsided to $3.72 per gallon as of Monday, according to data from AAA. Finance ministers representing the G7, which includes Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the UK, plus the United States, committed earlier this month to pursue a joint price cap on Russian oil. The minister affirmed that bloc, which will continue to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes by banning the sale of Russian oil above a given rate. What's that going to do for you? They're just going to go sell it to China. That dude has no problem leaving you guys out in the cold because you came and gave him the finger when he went over into the Ukraine. And again, once it starts getting really cold, unfortunately, you guys have shown your hand, and he knows that you're going to be looking for cheap energy at that point. I don't know what you think that this is going to do, but I don't think this is going to turn out the way that you guys think that it's going to. Our price cap proposal is designed to both lower Russian revenues that they use to support their economy and fight this illegal war, while also maintaining Russian oil supplies that will help hold down global oil prices, Yellen told CNN. So I believe this is something that can be essential, and it's something we're trying to put into place to avoid a future spike in oil prices. However, energy ministers representing the EU member states failed to reach a consensus on the price cap during a Friday meeting. The nations may instead compel fossil fuel companies to pay a solidarity contribution that would ease soaring energy prices, which have increased more than tenfold for some households and businesses. After the finance ministers announced the price cap, Russia severed natural gas flow to the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. Yeah, who could have seen that coming? Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin doubled down on the restricted shipments, remarking the Eastern Economic Forum that he's prepared to ignore existing supply agreements. Will there be any political decisions that contradict contracts? Yes, we just won't fulfill them. We will not supply anything at all if it contradicts our interests, Putin said. We will not supply gas, oil, coal, heating oil. We will not supply anything. So, that's what we see coming out of fuel prices. This is going to be an interesting winter. No matter what happens in November, no matter what happens this coming October, this winter, the months between November 15th and February 15th, are going to be very interesting. I hope you have some popcorn. Let's get into the main news of the day. Let's start talking, since we're talking about fuel already, let's start talking about California. From Fox News, California gas car ban, interesting. EV adoption must happen quickly to beat climate change, says Buttigieg, who probably has a large amount of EV stock sitting in his portfolio. From Bradford Betts, I'm not going to lie, by the way, I'm actually considering getting some EV stock, as long as the government's going to start trying to mandate this down and force it down your throats. I don't agree with the sentiment, but I might as well make a little bit of money off of it. From Bradford Betts. Note, this is not official financial advice. Secretary of Trains Pete Buttigieg on Thursday appeared to heap praise on states' efforts to fight climate change, particularly California's gas car ban, which go well beyond policies set at the federal level, mostly because you can't set a policy like that at a federal level. That would be unconstitutional. In an interview with Fox 11's The Issue Is, that aired on Friday, Buttigieg was asked to comment on California's plan to ban new gas cars by the year 2035 in favor of electric vehicles, and whether it could be a national model. Fact check, it can't. The ban was passed just days before the state began struggling with keeping the lights on during a late summer heat wave. What is he wearing? Is that a hard hat? Buttigieg evaded answering directly whether the Biden admin would implement a similar policy, but he said it was interesting that some states were trying to go above and beyond what we're doing at a federal level. I'm really interested in following these developments. While we continue to set a national policy, that's the baseline for all of this. We need to move in the direction of electric vehicles. Buttigieg said before acknowledging that some major industries are already moving in the direction independently. But we've got to make sure that this happens quickly enough to help us beat climate change. We've got to make sure that it happens affordably enough, that it's not just wealthy people. Which it is. But also low-income people who most need those gas savings if they can afford an EV in the first place, Buttigieg says. More than a dozen states are debating whether to adopt similar plans to California's gas-powered vehicle bans by 2035. Several of the 17 states are likely to move forward with the plan, including Washington, Massachusetts, New York, Oregon, and Vermont. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm was more explicit in her endorsement of California's gas-powered ban, saying recently that she backed it and commended the states for leaning in on climate policy. This administration, I'm telling you right now, it's just like the Obama administration. They love poor people. They love poor people so much, they make more of them every single day. I think California's really leaning in, Granholm said when asked if she supported California's law. And of course, The federal government has a goal that the president has announced by 2030 that half the vehicles in the U.S., the new ones, sold would be electric. During its current heat wave, California has asked residents to refrain from using large appliances and plugging in their EVs to charge at certain times of day to avoid overwhelming the state's power grid. Tesla CEO Elon Musk and Toyota CEO Akio Toyoda have both warned that electric generation capacity must increase dramatically if millions more cars are to be powered by the grid instead of gas. Not only do you need to increase gen capacity significantly for that to work, you've also got the little glaring issue right now of the infrastructure, getting the power from the power plant to the car, which California is having just as much problem with that than it is. Don't get me wrong, they send higher voltage than that all across the state already. But once you start putting that strain, once you start putting that draw in to go with them, you start to run into issues with that. And I don't think we're there yet. And again, honestly, I don't think the government has any business telling you what it is that you can and cannot buy. But they've been doing that forever. And, I mean, it goes down when it comes to the trucking industry. Oh, well, we're just going to come back and we're going to refine the emission standards until nobody can afford to have one of the older vehicles in service. Meanwhile, again, and I know miles per gallon is not something that's considered when we go down to electric vehicles, but I'm going to use this as an example. They put all this emission stuff onto the big diesel engines, the commercial diesel engines, DPF, DOC, SCR, and your fuel economy drops significantly. And it got even to a point where, by federal law, people were looking for ways around that and building what they call a glider kit, because the emissions year of the vehicle is the emissions year of the engine that you're putting into it. So they go and get a reman Detroit Series 60 from the late 90s, electric, but barely, and put it into a brand new chassis and put a transmission and axles behind it, and you're back out on the road getting 7, 8, 9 miles per gallon in some cases, depending on what you're hauling, obviously. While your competitors, with all their emissions on the back of them, are getting 4 and 5, depending again on what you're hauling. I have seen older vehicles, carbureted vehicles, get either better fuel economy or better emissions than hybrids. What was it? An electric carb on an 81 Camry that gets 51 miles to the gallon at a time when hybrids were only getting 45. It's amazing what some of this technology out there can do, and a lot of the times it comes back and backfires. Again, we're looking at the California energy grid right now. Yeah, it's great that everyone can just plug in their car and everything's going to be good, and I don't make any noise when I drive around, and I have no tailpipe emissions. But what is that going to do for the generation? Either the electric grid, the strain on the solar field, or the coal, or the nuclear power plant. What's it going to do to those things? And above all, if you want to buy the EV, buy the EV. But if you don't, the government shouldn't be out there trying to tell you that you have to. Unfortunately, we have more Pete Buttigieg news from WXYZ out of Detroit. Michigan GOP co-chair under fire for homophobic tweet about Pete Buttigieg. Man, do I hope the people at WXYZ don't see some of your Twitter accounts. I'm just saying. Because I've got a feeling that whatever this... Because I haven't pre-read this article. I've got this feeling that whatever this Michigan GOP co-chair has said is pretty vanilla and pretty mild compared to what I've seen on some of your Twitter accounts. And that's a compliment to you guys, by the way. Michigan Republican Party co-chair Michonne Maddock is under fire after sending out a homophobic tweet about Transportation Secretary Pete Buttplug. In the tweet, Maddock calls Buttigieg, who is gay, a weak little girl and references his move to Michigan. Buttigieg, the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, moved to Traverse City with his husband, Chasten, who grew up in Traverse City. He also served in the U.S. Navy Reserve for 8 years and was deployed to Afghanistan for 7 months in 2014. I guess that means he's the man's man? I don't know. Maddox's tweet was in reference to California's ban on new gas cars starting in 2035. We're so blessed this weak little girl moved to Michigan. Look what he's bringing all his California dreaming here with him, Maddock wrote. Democrats blasted Maddock for a tweet, with State Rep. Samantha Steckloff from Farmington Hills tweeting in part, "The Michigan GOP chair chose today to raise homophobic and bigoted attacks against Michiganders. The bigotry, homophobia, and anti-Semitism is so ramped up in their chosen leaders." Dude, how is that homophobic? And she goes on. First they were okay with deeper no for Michigan. Tweet using the white supremacy stumble. Pepe the Frog. Dude, I've seen progressives use Pepe. And now this. The bigotry, homophobia, and anti-Semitism is so ramped up in their chosen leaders. There is so much wrong with this tweet. I can't even begin to parse it all back out in the time that we have allotted for ourselves today. Pepe the Frog. We reached out to Michigan Republican Party for a statement on the tweet, but they declined to comment. This isn't the first time Maddock has come under fire for a tweet. In January, she called Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist a scary masked man when he tweeted a video after testing positive for the pinko pox. Michigan Democratic Party Chair Lavora Barnes released a statement at the time saying in part, "Is it still accurate to call something a dog whistle when it's actively shattering your eardrums?" Michonne Maddock's racism was on full display with his horrendous comment about a Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist. It adds to the already miles-long list of her actions that the Michigan GOP and Republican elected officials and candidates continue to endorse with their silence. What? Why is a scary masked man? Why is that racist? So, is it just racist because he's black? And then she made a comment about him? That's not a racist comment. And furthermore, unless you know beyond the shadow of a doubt that Mayor Pete is the receiver, calling him a weak little girl isn't really homophobic either. In fact, I thought you loved it when boys pretended to be girls. Oh, this is one of these situations where everything is just so absolutely stupid. Everything is stupid, folks. It really is. I would love for the good people at WXYZ to stumble across... I said at the top of the article, I would hate for them to stumble across some of your Twitter accounts. At this point, I would love for them to stumble across them. They'd be scarred for life. Especially Stevens. They would be scarred for life. Oh, everything is stupid. From The Blaze. Speaking of everything being stupid, the title card for this episode. I am Fetterwoman. Democrat Senate candidate vows to end filibuster and protect abortion at a rally. You know, somebody looked at this title and said, yeah, that's going to make everybody love me. Somebody wrote this, looked at this, and says, this is an epic troll. Let's read on. From Chris Pandolfo. And they printed a t-shirt, because of course they did. Because why wouldn't they? Man, everything is stupid again. Pennsylvania Democrat Senate candidate John Fetterman rebranded himself as John Fetterwoman at a rally on Sunday where he doubled down on his extreme abortion with no limits position. Women are the reason that we can win. Let me say that again. Women are the reason we win, Fetterman declared in front of a large group in Bluebell, Pennsylvania, against a pink and black backdrop. Don't tick women off, he said, before launching into a speech that touted his pro-choice position and attacked his Republican opponent, Dr. Mehmet Oz, as a fake doctor and an authoritarian who wants to control women's bodies. All right. Let's watch the cringe.
My name is John Fetterwoman.
Yeah, he actually said that. What? Why do we live in the dumbest timeline? I can't. I really can't. Fetterman promised to be the 51st vote to eliminate the Senate filibuster and codify Roe v. Wade into federal law, guaranteeing the right to an abortion and overriding abortion restrictions and regulations passed by pro-life states. That will probably get shot down by the Supreme Court because there's this little thing called the 10th Amendment. Although, if they're going to do it at a federal level, at least they're going to try and do it in the legislation. Something they have tried for 50 years to avoid. And then they'll probably lose the legislature after that. This decision, should it be made up to Dr. Oz, or to a woman and a real doctor to choose? Fetterman asked the audience to loud cheers. He attacked Oz for stating that abortion is murder. It is. And claimed the Republican doesn't believe in exceptions for rape or incest. Well, I know that that's going to be one where a lot of us are societally on the out for that, but I think a lot of us that are here agree that you shouldn't punish the child for the sins of the father either. If every abortion is a murder, that means Dr. Oz considers every woman who had to choose abortion as a killer, Fetterman said. Democrat candidates have sought to put Republicans on defense over abortion since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June. And in the constitutional protections for abortion, many GOP candidates have scrubbed hardline pro-life positions from their websites as attacks from the left, and polls show Democrat voters, particularly women, have been animated by the abortion issue. Oz is among those who have walked back his statements on abortion after winning the Republican primary. Earlier this month, he told reporters he does not support criminal penalties for women who sought or doctors who performed abortions. While he identified as strongly pro-life, Oz says he supports exceptions permitting abortions in case of rape, incest, or life of the mother. Fetterman has adopted a stance of abortion on demand with no exceptions. At a debate earlier this year, he said there are no limits on abortion that he would support. Let's listen.
Are there any limits on abortion you would find appropriate?
I don't believe so, no. I believe that is between a woman and her physician.
I kind of wish we could have seen more of that clip, honestly. But yes, he is Fetterwoman. Hear him. Her? Roar. There's a marketing student out there somewhere, probably a first-year intern marketing student, that's looking at that shirt right now, very smugly and saying, yeah, I did that. And that's going to be the win. That's going to be what gives us a 100-seat Senate. And all the Republicans are gone out of the Senate. Probably because that marketing student has no idea how the Senate works. I guarantee you there's a marketing student out there that's sitting there. And again, it's probably a first-year intern that's thinking that right now. From the Hill. Let's move to the other side of the country. Democrat Hobbs refuses to debate conspiracy theorist Lake in Arizona governor's race. From Brad Dress. Democrat candidate Katie Hobbs announced Sunday that she will not debate her GOP opponent in the race to become Arizona's next governor. Unfortunately, debating a conspiracy theorist like Kari Lake, whose entire campaign platform is to cause enormous chaos and make Arizona the subject of national ridicule, would only lead to constant interruptions, pointless distractions, and childish name-calling, Nicole DeMont, the campaign manager for Hobbs, said in a statement. Arizonans deserve so much better than Kari Lake, and that's why we're confident that Katie Hobbs will be elected our next governor. Why would you ever elect Katie Hobbs? Why would you ever elect somebody who has no interest in confrontation? See, and this is a part of the Democrat platform is, we're going to stand up to big business. How do you expect a person to stand up to big business? Which, by the way, you're not going to stand up to big business because big business is your donors. But let's take that out. Let's take that out of context for a second and actually look at their platform and say, okay, Katie Hobbs, you're going to stand up to big business and special interests. How? Because you can't even stand up to a MAGA candidate that you deem unintelligent. These people that you claim you're going to stand up to are highly intelligent, know how to hide their assets and keep them away from taxation, and know how to throw donations into your coffers quietly and secretly to a way that we can only find them by looking into open secrets. How exactly do you plan on standing up to those people if you can't even stand up to a news reporter whom you have deemed as stupid? Instead, the Democratic nominee will participate in a town hall-style event in which the candidates are questioned separately, the statement said. The Hobbs campaign was responding to Citizens Clean Elections Commission, a state commission that monitors and organizes the debates. The commission last week rejected a request from Hobbs to do separate televised town hall events and gave the candidates 7 days to come to an agreement for the October 12th debate. Hobbs' decision on Sunday will likely kill any chance of a debate before the November election, which is projected as a toss-up. I would love to see this stop being a toss-up, because both Oz and Lake are demanding debates from the people that they're standing against. And again, if you're going to go elect somebody to go honk honk, stand up to the big special interests, but that person can't even stand up to his political opponent or her political opponent, what exactly are you electing? Oh, well, I'm voting against the MAGA candidates. Hobbs, Arizona Secretary of State, has frequently lambasted Lake for repeating former President Trump's false claims the 2020 election was stolen. Well, Kari Lake has said that you can bring up any question that you want, that anything's on the table, and she will still beat you in the debate. So you could confront her with that. The Hobbs campaign has pointed to a June GOP primary debate in which Lake said the 2020 election was rigged. Honk honk, nothing bad happened though, YouTube. 81 million votes, 10 scoops of ice cream, most secure election in history. And Democrats would cheat in the upcoming election, which they didn't in the previous election. Honk honk, 81 million votes. Nothing bad happened, 10 scoops of ice cream, most popular president in history, as evidence that any debate would be a mess. But Hobbs' refusal to debate could bolster Lake's claims that her opponent is afraid of confrontation. Which she is. Lake, a former TV news anchor, said last week that she would take the stage to herself on October 12th if Hobbs does not show up. It's becoming clearer every day that Hobbs' strategy is to hide from me, the press, the voters throughout the entirety of the campaign and run out the clock on the people of Arizona, Lake tweeted. I mean, apparently honk honk, wink wink, nudge nudge, it worked for Biden. More popular than Barack Obama, 81 million votes, 10 scoops of ice cream. From the Daily Wire, more on Lake and Hobbs. Private school grad Katie Hobbs releases anti-school choice plan. From somebody who enjoyed school choice. From Myreed Elordi. Katie Hobbs, the Democratic nominee for Arizona governor, released her education plan on Sunday, which doubles down on her opposition to school choice. Hobbs, who is currently Arizona's Secretary of State, and herself a private school graduate, and her education plan for Arizona includes cracking down on state schools' voucher program. Too often, Republicans have completely disregarded the public opinion on an effort to defund our public schools at every turn. They have moved to expand school vouchers without common sense measures of accountability with the clear intent to eventually do away with our local public schools, Hobbs said in her plan. I'm going to push back on that in just a sec, but I want to read a little bit more of this. Arizona expanded its school voucher program over the summer. Governor Ducey signed a bill in July allowing every Arizona student to get a taxpayer-funded empowerment scholarship account to pay for their education at a private school. About $6,500 per child for grades 1 through 12. In the first 2 weeks after the online portal for the new ESA applications opened, the state received around 6,800 new applications for school vouchers. Hobbs said as governor she would roll back the expansion. Vouchers should not have been expanded to provide an unaccountable means for enriching private schools and defunding our local public schools, she said in her plan. Hobbs also attacked Arizona Republicans, whom she said pressed forward with the latest attack on our schools by passing the universal expansion of school vouchers. The unaccountable spending of taxpayer dollars needs to change, she said. Meanwhile, though, Hobbs also wants Arizona public schools to be able to spend more money. Her plan supports eliminating Arizona's spending limit on public schools, known as the aggregate expenditure limit, which caps the amount of money public schools can spend out of their budget. Arizona's public schools are estimated to spend $1.3 billion less this fiscal year with a spending cap. Hobbs herself is a beneficiary of the private school education. So I've got a couple pushbacks on this, one against the Daily Wire and one against Hobbs. As far as the Daily Wire goes, we'll start with that. Now, I'm sure that the writer of this article thinks that this is the biggest own in the world. That Katie Hobbs went to a private school and she doesn't want to have private school for anybody else out there. While part of that is true, part of that is not true. Hobbs, of course, went to a private school back at a time. She went to Seton Catholic Prep in '88, back at a time where if you were going to a Catholic private school, you were paying for it out of pocket. Hands down, full stop. Any private tuition was out of pocket. And it was the same thing, like in the small town that I grew up in, that only had a K through 8 Catholic school. And then everybody got thrown together in high school. But she paid for that out of pocket. What Hobbs is trying to come back out against is taking the funding away from the public schools and giving it out to the private schools to give them an advantage, knowing full well that is a better education, but she only wants that better education for the elite. She's not trying to eliminate private school. She's just trying to make sure that not every workaday working Joe can have access to it. Because that's what the teachers' union is paid for her to do. Now, as far as pushing back against Hobbs on this, Hobbs comes back up here, further up here. Too often Republicans have completely disregarded the public opinion in an effort to defund our public schools. At every turn, they have moved to expand school vouchers without common sense measures of accountability, with a clear intent to eventually do away with our local public schools, Hobbs said in her plan. There are always going to be situations out there where there are going to be people who either want or need to be able to go to the public school. I don't like that fact, by the way, but there are always going to be situations. A parent doesn't care, a parent doesn't want to go back out, or for whatever reason, bad grades, extremely poor behavioral issues, or etc. There's going to be a necessity for public schools. That is never going to go away. I wish it could go away, but that's never going to be able to go away. What I, and most Republicans who actually understand the issue, talk about, and I know that there are some out there who are just saying that they want private school because the person on Newsmax told them that private school is better than public school. There are those people out there. The people on Zero American News and Newsmax told them. The people who actually understand don't want to eliminate the public school, but they want there to be a competition for it. Because competition raises the standards for everybody. If the public school keeps looking out and saying, we are losing all of our money to these private options, we need to crank up the quality of our education so people will come back to our public school. And unfortunately, that means that they are going to have to get rid of some of the dead weight that's being protected by the teachers union. One of the things that I look at constantly is the Milwaukee public school system. And knowing several people that have gone through the Milwaukee public school system and how bad it actually is. And how much of an effort there is to get the students out of the Milwaukee public school system and into the choice program, which I used to be strongly against until I realized that this put a competition into the market. So I do have a pushback on both ends of this, but the school choice is a good idea. Get the competition out there. Arizona Public Schools, if you want those dollars, raise your education standards.
I'll get you there.
All right. Here's one from the Biden admin. From Fox News, Biden admin to place harm reduction kiosks filled with drug supplies in rural Kentucky. I think I should have tried to get to this before Gaines took off, as I believe he is in rural Kentucky. From Bradford Betts. The Biden admin is set to place vending machines filled with drug paraphernalia and other supplies in rural Kentucky to help reduce the stigma of drug use and help prevent the spread of HIV. The outreach service kiosk will be supplied with injection equipment, naloxone, fentanyl test strips, hygiene kits, condoms, according to a National Institute of Health grant awarded last month. Interest in reduction kiosks is soaring nationwide, and the proposed project would provide critical and timely data to inform scale-up of this model, especially in rural areas of the country where they've been severely impacted by substance use-related harms, the grant says. The grant noted that previous harm reduction methods, like syringe service programs, failed because of the stigma associated with them. The Biden admin first referenced the experiment in August 31st press release, noting that fiscal year 2023 budget request to Congress included a $3.2 billion increase in funding for critical public health interventions. The Washington Free Beacon was the first outlet to report the Kentucky Outreach Service kiosk. The Beacon reported on February that the Biden admin would fund the distribution of crack pipes through a $30 million Health and Human Services grant program that reimburses local governments and entities that provide safe smoking kits in the name of advancing racial equity and safer drug use for addicts. I'm fairly libertarian when it comes to drugs. I think most people know that. If you want to rot your brain with crack, if you want to use fentanyl until your veins explode, if you want to snort coke until your penis shrinks away and your heart drops out your butthole, or if you want to smoke weed until you have no idea what's going on, I don't care. That's between you and the people around you. I don't think the government needs to be involved in that, either busting you or trying to get you and keep you high. And what am I looking at when I see something like this? Hey, vote for us and you can stay drugged out, strung out, boozed out, with no consequences for the rest of your life. On the taxpayer dime for the hook of $3.2 billion. So that's what we see coming off of that. Alright, let's move on into the government behaving badly from the Daily Wire. Disgraced former CNN host Chris Cuomo slams Democrats for demonizing everybody who voted for Trump. Mr. Cuomo, have a mirror. From the Daily Wire News. Disgraced former CNN host Chris Cuomo slammed Democrats for demonizing everyone who voted for President Trump, saying that some Trump supporters are very open to reasonable, regular rhetoric. Cuomo responded to a leftist who claimed that Trump supporters demonize immigrants, Jews, African Americans, and anyone who isn't Christian by their standards. Hey, I think you need to look more off Twitter, social media, Cuomo said. This place is not reality. It's an exaggeration that caters to fringe and those who profit from it. Which is really funny because this is the same kind of stuff that he said on CNN. Liberally Liberal, who's Jay Jadeja, says, "Brother, I do not understand how we can assuage the fears of those who demonize immigrants, Jews, African Americans, and anyone who isn't Christian by their standards. For example, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, and their voters who believe that we Dems are pedos and belong to a cabal." I'm going to leave that one alone for right now. In a separate tweet, Cuomo retweeted a tweet from his former employer that stated, let's read and then we'll read the quote tweet off of this. Exclusive. I'm just not going to leave, Trump repeatedly insisted he wouldn't leave the White House after his election loss, a new book by New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman reveals. Cuomo, tweeting back, "Does this matter? Yes, in the pursuit of justice, which is happening aggressively by most accounts. However, do Dems win more votes by chasing Trump or catering to hopes and fears of those who are disaffected and desperate enough to vote for him, huh?" Cuomo responded to another leftist who mockingly suggested that Trump supporters just happen to be racist and xenophobic. Michael Moran. And then they just also happen to be racist and xenophobic. But it was all about being disaffected and voting a con man in to fight corruption. Cuomo quote tweets, Hey, wise guy, some, not all. You're overstating and it hurts your ability to expand reach. Yang says many of his knee supporters are former Trump voters. Why didn't Dems get them? Maybe because you demonize all who voted for him. Which is what Cuomo did for the entire 4 years of the Trump presidency on CNN. I will give credit where credit's due for the fact that he is saying the right thing right now. Trying to bridge some of the gap that's out there, which there are people out there who have a vested interest in making sure that we are at each other's throats constantly. But with Cuomo, a lot of it's too little too late. Like, he was able to say some of the same stuff, like Jay Jadeja was saying, like CNN Politics were saying, and like Michael Moran were saying. He was able to say a lot of the same stuff for sensationalism and clicks on CNN. I don't even know where Chris Cuomo actually stands, because I know a lot of what he did was stage presence for CNN. From The Hill. This is an op-ed for The Hill. by Juan Williams, who is an opinion contributor. The views expressed by the contributors are their own and not the view of the Hill. Taking this a step further, the views expressed in this op-ed are the views of the contributor and not the views of Contemporary, Turns of Pages Productions, or your host, J. Edgar. Let's read. Juan Williams, democracy is at stake in this year's midterms. Just like it was in 2020, and 2018, and 2016, and 2014, oh no, and 2012, and 2010, oh no, democracy's at stake, oh my god, and in 2008, oh, in 2006. Yeah, they pull this out every other year. They've been doing it for as long as I can remember. Which brings us back all the way over to stupid-ass HW. Excuse my language. And probably long before that. But that's as far as I can remember. Fighting Joe Biden has had enough. And so have the majority of Americans, me included. But not the hard-right echo chamber. They say the president is divisive for calling out MAGA extremists, semi-fascists, and people who are entitled to be an idiot. No, he called for the extermination of 74 million people. We watched the speech on this program the day after it happened. They say that Biden is demonizing the 74 million people who voted against him in the last presidential election. Do we need to get the speech again? I will get the speech again. They say Biden is the real authoritarian trying to shut down legitimate criticism. This is pure spin! It's a cheap attempt to have every Trump voter feel that they're required to defend all Trump voters. To be a member of the club, they must stand by the roughly 25% of GOP voters who believed in the twisted QAnon conspiracy theory. They must make excuses for the violent Trump supporters who shut down the Capitol. That means ignoring even those who threatened to hang former Vice President Pence. Well, if you have a problem with the people who threatened to hang former Vice President Mike Pence, give me just a second. If you do have a problem with the people who were chanting to hang Mike Pence or trying to start the chant at least, you can go to a low-rise office building located at 935 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest in Washington, D.C., and make your complaints known to the people who did it. Note, do not do that in this particular political environment. You will become deceased if you do. By the way, that's the address for the FBI headquarters, the J. Edgar Hoover building. Well, yes, I would normally advocate and say, yes, take your complaint to the people who actually did this. With the way that Democrats have painted anybody who wants to go and talk to the FBI that is not of the Democrat persuasion, do not do this. Do not do this. You will become deceased. And if you become deceased, you cannot watch this program on weekday mornings. Do not bring your fight to the government. They are better at killing than you are. Let the government bring their fight to you. They're still better at killing you than you are, but if they come to you and start stacking bodies like cordwood, they have a real optics problem in a hurry. It means not talking about Trump's recent suggestion of full pardons with an apology for many of the people convicted for their actions on January 6, 2021. And of course, it's an article of faith for much of today's GOP to believe the 2020 election was stolen from Trump. Honk honk. Nothing bad happened. Honk honk. 81 million votes. Honk honk. 10 scoops of ice cream. Polls show about 70% of Republicans join in chorus singing the fiction that voter fraud led to Biden's victory and that he's a phony in the White House. Hong Kong, most popular president in history. They also must dismiss the danger of Trump taking classified documents to Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, this is the same thing. And going back and looking back at the famous speech where Biden himself went out and stopped just short of calling for the extermination of 74 million people in this country. Going back to that for just a second, this once again, if you listen to the speech, listen to the name that's mentioned, and listen to things like this, what the people like Juan Williams are trying to do when they do something like this is they are trying desperately to keep you talking about the Orange Man. Because if you talk about the Orange Man, then you can't talk about 8.6% inflation. At national average, $3.68 a gallon gas. Local average, $3.19 a gallon gas. In a market that was under $2 when Biden took office. And you don't talk about the fact that unemployment is ticking up right now. That the jobs report looks terrible. That every time you go to the grocery store, even if you're a single man by yourself, it costs you $50. Every single damn time. I actually shudder to think what my friends with kids are paying when they go. Because I know, as a guy, just a guy, who eats literally nothing but meat and raw vegetables, it's $50 every time I go to the grocery store. But Juan goes on. Biden rightly called out all the spinning, gaslighting, and outright lying as a threat to democracy during his recent speech in Philadelphia. He took care to show respect to conservative Republicans who dance when they pull the puppet strings. Hey, I called you a racist, now back down! Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. Yeah, some of them dance when I tell them to. I know, because I've been able to work with some of these, he said. That's where Joe went off track. Here's the rub. A lot of extremism is fueled by self-described moderate Republicans making people excuses for bad behavior. Yeah. And again, this is Juan Williams trying to make you keep talking about the Orange Man, when you should be talking about the red background and the extermination of 74 million of this man's political enemies. That speech should be played in its entirety on repeat from now until November. Alright, from the Daily Wire. New York Times, polls may be headed for another major miss, overstating Dem support in battleground states. From John Rigolizzo. The New York Times chief political analyst said Monday that the 2022 midterms may be yet another massive miss for the polling industry. Democrats have been surging in the polls in several key battleground states, but an article entitled "Yes, the Polling Warning Signs Are Flashing Again," New York Times chief political analyst Nate Cohn said that the same errors in data collection that vastly overstated Democrat support in the 2020 election are cropping up again in the same areas in recent polling, meaning that Democrats may not be as strong as polls indicate. Cohn began his article with the data from a 2020 showing the gap between media and university polling and the actual election results in 11 battleground states among the most egregious errors. In Wisconsin, President Biden had a 10-point advantage over former President Trump in statewide polling. Biden won the state by less than a point, a 9-point miss. In Pennsylvania, Biden led Trump by 5 points in the polls. He won the state by 1 point, a 4-point miss. In Florida, by the way, honk honk, Biden held a 2-point advantage over Trump. Trump won by 3 points, a 5-point miss. In Ohio, polls showed that Trump led Biden by less than a point. He won it by 8, a 7-point miss. And in Iowa, Trump led by a point. He won by 8, another 7-point miss. We created this poll error table for a reason. Early in 2020 cycle, we noticed that Biden seemed to be outperforming Hillary Clinton in the same places where the polls overestimated her in 2016, Cohn recalled. That pattern didn't necessarily mean the polls could be wrong. It would have just reflected Mr. Biden's promised strength among white working-class voters, for instance, but it was a warning sign. That warning sign is flashing again. Democratic Senate candidates are outrunning expectations in the same places where the polls overestimated Mr. Biden and Mrs. Clinton in 2020 and 2016, respectively. A similar phenomena is taking place in states like Wisconsin in 2022, Cohen wrote. According to 538's Electoral Fundamentals Index, Johnson is a 2-point favorite over Mandela Barnes. But a recent Marquette University poll, which Cohen calls gold standard in Wisconsin, has Barnes leading Johnson by 7 points. Wisconsin was ground zero for a survey error in 2020, said Cohen, and the potential polling misses between 2020 and 2022 elections closely mirror each other. It raises the possibility that the apparent Democrat strength in Wisconsin and elsewhere is a mirage, an artifact of persistent and unaddressed biases in survey research, Cohen wrote. If the polls are wrong yet again, it will not be hard to explain. Most pollsters haven't made significant methodological advances since the last election. There are a few things to look at with this, especially when we look at the polling in these states. Now, number one, let's look at the states that are in question. Florida and Ohio and Iowa are all very, very solid red states at this point. But Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, those are two of the states where the people who do believe that there was honking happening believe that we're honked. These are two states by which we start to see massive questions about what happened and extreme voter turnout and numerous other things that go along with this. In my state, in Wisconsin, it is going to come down to basically how Milwaukee and Madison and Green Bay vote. End of story. That's going to be it. Madison is a foregone conclusion. Milwaukee, I could see going either direction. So we will see what happens with that and where that goes. What do we have here? Eric Beam tweets out, breaking, the Libertarian Party of Virginia becomes the most libertarian party of all. Quote tweeting Andy Craig, who says, the Libertarian Party of Virginia has voted to dissolve itself and no longer exists as an LP national affiliate. That is really the most libertarian thing of all. Let's look at the pictures here. Whereas it is the proper function of the Libertarian Party of Virginia to serve as a vehicle for libertarians to engage in political process in the Commonwealth, whereas the LP of Virginia is an affiliate and standard bearer for the National Libertarian Party in Virginia, whereas the stated purposes of the LP, per the party's national bylaws, are functioning as a libertarian political entity, separate and distinct from all other political parties or movements, electing libertarians to public office to move public policy in a libertarian direction, chartering affiliate parties through the U.S. and promoting their growth activities, nominating candidates for president and vice president of the U.S. and supporting party and affiliate candidates for public office, and entering into public information activities. That is a lot of words here. We're going to skip around in this a little bit. There's a lot of whereases here. Be it resolved, pursuant to the provisions by the Code of Virginia Section 13.1, Section 903, et sec, that the Libertarian Party of Virginia is hereby immediately and fully dissolved, and shall cease all official functions, including expenditures and receipt of contributions, as provided in Article 13, and such other actions as may be required to effectuate the same. Well, that makes it official. They are the most libertarian party in the entire U.S. Let's talk abortion, since we've spent so much time talking about the other things up at the top of the program. Let's talk about that. From ABC News, Indiana special judge takes up abortion ban challenge after 2 judges recused themselves. From Nadine El Bawab. Indiana Special Judge Kelsey Hanlon has agreed to preside over a lawsuit brought by abortion providers challenging the state's abortion ban after 2 judges recused themselves from the case. A near-total ban on abortions is set to go into effect in Indiana on September 15th. Plaintiffs have asked the court for a preliminary injunction to stop the ban's implementation until the lawsuit is resolved. Monroe Circuit Court Judge Holly Hari recused herself from presiding over the lawsuit last week. Her office declined to comment to ABC News on her decision. The case was transferred to Judge Jeffrey Bradley, but Bradley declined jurisdiction over the case on Thursday without listing a reason for his recusal in court filings. Indiana's ban makes it a felony to provide abortion services and only allows for 3 exceptions, according to the lawsuit. Abortions up to certain stages in pregnancy are permitted if the woman's life is in danger, if the fetus is diagnosed with a fetal anomaly, or if the pregnancy was a result of rape or incest, according to the lawsuit. Providers who violate the bans will have their license revoked and could face between 1 and 6 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. The suit alleges the ban infringes on the resident's right to privacy, therefore violating Indiana's guarantee of equal privileges and immunities. Moreover, the law violates the state constitution's due course of law clause because it unconstitutionally vague language, the lawsuit states. The lawsuit was filed by abortion providers, including Planned Parenthood, Lawyering Project, and the ACLU of Indiana, and Wilmer Hale on behalf of abortion providers, including Planned Parenthood, Women's Med Group Professional Corp, and All Options. So people who stand to benefit financially from the practice are suing so they can continue to benefit financially from slaughtering babies. And by the way, this is why I would rather tackle this at a societal level than a legislative level. Knowing again full well that may be impossible by the society that we've done, I would still rather see this done back to a position where an abortion was something you didn't talk about and something you got only as a last resort, and instead did everything you could before the pregnancy to stop it from happening. From Click on Detroit 4, going back to something we had to skip over yesterday because there was almost nothing in the MLive article. Groups say Michigan abortion amendment invalidates nearly 50 laws, and here's what experts are saying. From Grant Hermes and Morgan Russ. In a list obtained by Local 4, anti-abortion groups claim they've identified up to 47 laws they think would be repealed or rendered invalid if abortion rights amendment is passed in Michigan. The group says because of a section that says all laws surrounding pregnancy would be addressed under a new amendment. On that long list are laws about parental consent, the age of consent to have sex, and even infanticide. The list also includes regulations about medical licensing, health and safety inspections, who can perform abortions. I think the biggest concerns with Proposal 3 are that it's too confusing and too extreme and too permanent, said Kristen Polo, the spokesperson for Citizens to Support Michigan Women's Children, which opposes the initiative. But experts say the claims may be dubious at best. A leading expert on the intersection of reproductive health and the law, Ed Goldman, an Obgyn professor and director of the University of Michigan's program in sexual rights and reproductive justice, was among them. I think the basic premise is that there are laws to prohibit things, and there are laws that regulate things. Laws that regulate things don't go away unless they're specifically reversed, Goldman said. Goldman says the idea is simple. Just because the amendment would be adding a right doesn't mean it takes away other laws or regulations. You can't add a right. A right is a thing that you have outside of society when you are out in the woods and have nothing. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If happiness involves slaughtering your offspring, you have the right to pursue that. You don't have the right to be successful. A law enshrining a right to an abortion does not mean it's now illegal to rape an 11-year-old or for an 11-year-old to have consensual sex with somebody. Those laws have nothing to do with an abortion, and they have everything to do with criminal law. Well, that's good because, really honestly, I see a lot of dangerous territory going off in this and a lot of questionable people among things like this. And this does have the Right to Reproductive Freedom Amendment text. This is short. We can actually read this. So let's go through this. Otherwise, I will put this in the Discord right now, so you guys can go back and read it at your leisure. In general chat, Article 1, Section 28, Right to Reproductive Freedom. Every individual has a fundamental right to reproductive freedom, which entails the right to make and effectuate decisions about all matters relating to pregnancy, including but not limited to prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, abortion care, miscarriage management, and infertility care. An individual's right to reproductive freedom shall not be denied, burdened, nor infringed upon unless justified by a compelling state interest achieved by the least restrictive means. Notwithstanding the above, the state may regulate the provision of abortion care after fetal viability, provided that in no circumstance shall the state prohibit an abortion that, in the professional judgment of an attending healthcare professional, is medically indicated to protect life or physical or mental health of the pregnant individual. The state shall not discriminate the protection or enforcement of this fundamental right. The state shall not penalize, prosecute, or otherwise take an adverse action against an individual based on their actual potential perceived or alleged pregnancy outcomes, including but not limited to miscarriage, stillbirth, or abortion, nor shall the state penalize, prosecute, or otherwise take adverse action against someone for aiding or assisting a pregnant individual in exercising the right to reproductive freedom with their voluntary consent. For the purposes of this section, the state's interest is compelling only if it is for the limiting purposes of protecting the health of the individual, seeking care consistent with the accepted clinical standards of practice and evidence-based medicine, and does not infringe on the individual's autonomous decision-making. Fetal viability means the point in pregnancy when, in the professional judgment of the attending health professional and based on the particular facts of the case, there is a significant likelihood of the fetus's sustained survival outside the uterus without the application of extraordinary medical measures. This section shall be self-executed. Any provision of this section held invalid shall be severable from the remaining portions of this section. Boy, that sounds more like a legislative law than an amendment. But, you know, when you get to states like this, where you've got to be the bluest and most progressive, we'll throw this in there and see what we can do. We are running up on the edge of the program. An old one from last week, but still one that's worth it to have a look at. Schumer announces same-sex marriage vote. Good. Don't do this by Obergefell. Do this legislatively. Then Obergefell has no teeth, which is what you should have been doing from the beginning. Now, of course, the 10th Amendment may step in, and you may be found that you have no ability to legislate a state's licensing practices. But the Interstate Commerce Clause says that you can still make a law that says that every state has to recognize a license issued by another state. From Marianne Levine. Chuck U. Schumer says the Senate would vote on legislation to protect same-sex marriage in the coming weeks, forcing Republicans to take a stance ahead of the midterm elections. A vote on marriage equality will happen on the Senate floor in the coming weeks, the majority leader told reporters on Wednesday. Schumer's announcement comes as Tammy Baldwin and Susan Collins are working to shore up the 10 GOP votes necessary to pass their bill to codify the same-sex marriage. Baldwin and Collins met earlier Wednesday with Rob Portman, Tom Tillis, Kirsten Sinema to discuss the path forward. In addition to Collins, Portman, and Tillis, Murkowski has spoken positively of the effort but hasn't committed to voting for it. Meanwhile, Ron Johnson, the most vulnerable GOP incumbent, said recently he won't support the bill in its current form, despite saying earlier this summer he saw no reason to oppose it. Well, that means that there's probably a little bit of pork tucked into there. Collins and Baldwin are currently working on an amendment that seeks to clarify the bill wouldn't affect religious liberty or conscience protections. In an effort to gain more Republican support, Johnson has specifically cited religious freedom concerns when he's talked about his reservations with the legislation. We're listening carefully to the concerns that have been raised by some of our colleagues, Collins said on Wednesday, and they're looking at an amendment that would strengthen the language in the bill to make it crystal clear that it does not in any way infringe on religious liberty, and it would correct a drafting error. The Senate push comes after the House passed legislation in July to protect same-sex marriage with support from 47 House Republicans. And again, even when it comes down to Obergefell, for a state property contract, there is no position for the federal government to come back down and tell a state how it can and cannot run its own contracting law. And with that being said, as I've said right from the beginning, with that being said now, you can pass the law because you have control over interstate commerce, or you can force the states to accept another state's contract. That's within the purview of your ability. That isn't within the purview of the Constitution. And I've not read this bill, so I don't know where it goes through or what it does as far as licensing requirements go. Furthermore, if you are so gay that all you can think about is sticking it to the man, why would you ever want to go stand in a church? Especially, and this is because I know that there's I think it's a Baptist church downtown Kenosha that's got the rainbows out of it, the pride flags out in front of it. We saw it while I was doing my On the Street video in Kenosha. Especially when you can go to a church like that. Why would you choose to go to a church that hates you? Or so you claim. To go force them to do your wedding ceremony. When there are any number of a half a dozen chapels, parks, justices of the peace that would do it for you if your state has that licensing. Why would you ever walk into a church building that claims to hate, or you claim hates you? Roe draft from CNN. Kagan calls leak of draft opinion overturning Roe horrible and expects an investigation update by month's end. From Ariana DeVogue. Justice Elena Kagan called the unprecedented leak of draft opinion striking down Roe v. Wade last term horrible, and said she expects justices to be given a status update by the end of the month on an investigation into the leak. I don't know anything. I suspect my colleagues don't know anything except for the Chief Justice, maybe, about what the investigation has turned up, if anything, she said of Chief Justice John Roberts and the probe he launched late last spring. But she called the leak shocking and an obvious blatant violation of the court's rules. If investigators have not figured out who the perpetrator was, the next serious question is how the court prevents the same thing from happening again, she said. The court, she added, depends on its deliberations and recent decisions, and you can't do that if you know that you might wake up tomorrow morning and there's a decision and it's on the front page of newspapers. Kagan appeared at Temple Emmanuel's Stricker Center for a conversation with Judge Allison J. Nathan, who sits on the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. The talk came less than a month before the new term is set to begin on October 3rd in the shadow of the midterm elections, when the justices will consider issues including voting rights, immigration, affirmative action, environmental regulations, and religious liberty. So, I guess we will see what comes out of this, where we go from here, and who did the leaking. I have actually no suspicions off of this, except for the fact that it was put out there to go and outrage people coming up into a midterm. In a situation, of course, where we go back and look at this, and as I said to Cheese Doodle over on Twitter, As I said to that person, who I reason to believe is named Laura, but as I said to that person, state actors who have a vested interest in keeping us at each other's throats. Because when we're at each other's throats, we look to these state actors for guidance and give them unprecedented power. From Politico. Suspect in Canada stab rampage died after arrest. From the Associated Press. The final suspect in a stabbing rampage that killed 10 people in and around Canadian Indigenous Reserve died after being arrested by police Wednesday. Following a manhunt that stretched more than 3 days, authorities said. One official said he died of self-inflicted injuries. Miles Sanderson, 32, was caught on a highway near the town of Rothsern in the province of Saskatchewan as officers responded to a report of a stolen vehicle being driven by a man armed with a knife. The RCMP said. Officers forced Sanderson's vehicle off the road and into a ditch. Assistant Commissioner Rhonda Blackmore, commander of the RCMP in Saskatchewan, said at a news conference he was detained and a knife was found inside the vehicle. She said Sanderson went into medical distress after he was arrested. She said CPR was attempted on him before the ambulance arrived. She said emergency medical personnel then took him to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. All life-saving measures that we were capable of were taken at the time, she said. Blackmore gave no details on the cause of death. I can't speak to the specific manner of death, she said. But an official who spoke on condition of anonymity earlier said Sanderson died of self-inflicted injuries without giving any further details. Well, I guess it's a little poetic that his final victim was himself, and you'll never take me alive, Kappas. I don't know, it feels a bit empty, but it appears that everybody in this situation was taken into custody, which means that the people of Saskatchewan are safe again. What else do we have before we get into Twitter trending? Which we're actually going to have to do pretty soon. Well, we'll grab another one left over from last week. Politico's new German owner has a contrarian plan for the American media. From Sarah Ellison. Months after his company bought Politico, Matthias Döpfner stood atop Axel Springer's 19-story headquarters gazing out at the double row of cobblestones that marked the outline of the demolished Berlin Wall and explained his global ambitions. "We want to be the leading digital publisher in democracies around the world," he said. A newcomer to the community of billionaire media moguls, Döpfner is given to bold pronouncements and visionary prescriptions. He is concerned that the American press has become too polarized, legacy brands like the New York Times and the Washington Post drifting to the left, in his view, while conservative media falls under the sway of Trumpian alternative facts. So in Politico, the fastest growing beltway political journal, he sees a grand opportunity. "We want to prove that being nonpartisan is actually the most successful positioning," he said in an interview with the Washington Post. He called it his biggest and most contrarian bet. How exactly Döpfner, Axel Springer's CEO, hopes to define nonpartisan journalism at an especially fragmented time for American politics is a question of intense interest as he aims to leave his mark on the American media. His own politics have remained something of a mystery too, but weeks before 2020 U.S. presidential election, he sent a surprising message to his closest executives obtained by the Washington Post. "Do we all want to get together for an hour in the morning on November 3rd and pray that Trump will again become president of the United States?" His email was inspired by a news story he shared about the government's plans to sue Google for abuse of the market dominance, an animating issue of his for years. But Döpfner went on to argue that Trump has made the right moves on 5 of what he deemed the 6 most important issues of the last half-century: defending the free democracies against Russia and China, pushing NATO allies to their contributions, tax reforms, and Middle East peace efforts, as well as challenging tech monopolies if falling short, he implied, on climate change. What's funny about this? Well, first off, they had to go digging to go find a story where he said, "I want to pray for Donald Trump." is the fact that just like CNN, with Politico trying to become nonpartisan, to people like Dabrowski, to people like the Washington Post, that is a dog whistle for trying to become extremist right wing. Unless you are pulling the most extreme left wing ideas, you are a partisan right winger, according to people like Sarah Ellison over at the Washington Post. So I guess we'll see what happens with Politico from here on out. If they have a proper article, I'll probably still use them. And we'll continue to watch. And I think we'll cut it here for the day here. But before we do, the last thing that we always do on a Tuesday is to sit and look at what the Twitter trending is doing. So we will take and look at the Explore tab. Bring that over here. No, bring the whole link over. Bring this over here. Come down on the trending and see what is trending. We will take the top 5 trends, skipping over Tuesday Vibe and Tuesday Motivation, and see what it is that people on the full website in and of itself should think that we should be talking about. Number 1 trending is Nintendo Direct. Yes, the annual time is here again where Nintendo releases its propaganda on what it's going to do for its next term. We have Just a Title Please, Breath of the Wild, Nintendo Direct. Band together and celebrate 35 years of Final Fantasy music and theatrical final bar line rhythm action game with 385 stirring songs coming to Switch. That would be interesting. New Fire Emblem Engage officially announced for January 20th, 2023 release. Never played a Fire Emblem game. I'm curious about them. Never played one. Octopath Traveler 2. I've heard of Octopath. I've never played it. That's Octopath Traveler. Fire Emblem. GoldenEye coming to NSO. Nintendo Switch Online. Yes, if you enjoyed the Nintendo 64 Classic, you can go play it again. Masks of the Lunar Eclipse. I wonder if they're going to get that other farming game that's supposed to be coming out for from Square Enix. My final attempt to summon Breath of the Wild 2 with this person's apparent entire Zelda collection. Well, we'll watch. We'll see what happens. Next one. Godard. Breaking news. Jean-Luc Godard, the daring director whose unconventional methods shaped French New Wave film in the 60s, has died at 91. For a person who's only ever seen 5 movies in his life, I have not seen a Godard film. So I don't know who this person is, but at 92 years old, from 1930 to 2022, Godard has passed. I couldn't even tell you what movies he has directed. Band of Outsiders, I guess, is one of them, from 1964. I don't know why these people are line dancing, but that's probably because I've never seen Band of Outsiders. Alright, number 3, sneakers. Nice kicks. Me, I'm going to the Off-White Air Force One sneakers. Laughter. You dumb bee. Like this tweet for good luck on sneakers. And we've seen this on the trending before, where there's usually a giveaway or something going on with, I think it's Nike stock. But yes, I will cop Off-White on Sneakers app. So apparently if you want to go get some shoes, go back and grab the Sneakers app. Next one. We don't have to skip any this time. Next one, Story of Seasons and video games. Animal Crossing World, Stories of Seasons, A Wonderful Life, a remake of Harvest Moon, A Wonderful Life for GameCube. It's coming to Nintendo Switch in summer of 2023. I don't know, man. I think I'll stick with the original Harvest Moon and its spiritual successor, Stardew Valley. Mostly because I can't afford a Switch right now. I'm trying to buy a house instead. I might see if I can find a copy of A Wonderful Life for GameCube, because I do have a GameCube. But yes, the remake will be coming to Nintendo Switch in the summer, which means you can farm in really good graphics. Or you can always go grab the emulated port, vintage copy of Harvest Moon, and play it on the Super Nintendo as God intended. Alright, and the last one, It Takes Two. Probably not talking about the hit 90s movie with Kirstie Alley and the Olsen twins. It Takes Two is coming to Switch on November 4th. It ain't always what it seems when you cling onto a dream. It ain't always there to please you, but he's the guy you want to do, and you know it takes two. Luckily, he wants to do you too. Nice. Poetry in Motion. Twitch shot on It Takes Two. Creation Magician. Not bad, but I have no friends. So apparently this is a co-op only game that'll be coming out from Switch. I've never heard of this game. Apparently it's on other platforms, but it's not on Switch, but it's coming to Switch. I don't know. Again, I don't have a Switch, but the Nintendo Direct took the majority of what it was that we saw on the trending today, and with that, we're out of here for the day. That was an interesting news day. Definitely was. A little bit of a slow chat day, but an interesting news day. Everybody congratulate Randy too, by the way, if you see him anywhere. Make sure you go and say, hey, Mazel Tov on your new house. Because it looks like that closing is going to be coming in the week. And there are some details in my life that I'm not going to say on chat, but it does look like things are looking up for me as well. Not maybe the way that I wanted them to be, but it's good news all the same. I do feel a little bit guilty about the way that it did have to turn out. But it winds up being a net good in and of itself. So let's head out of here for the day. Where's the outro music? The Terra theme from Final Fantasy VII, by the way. I like that song. And all of its remixes. But enough filibustering. Let's head out of here. So, thanks everybody who came by, chatted with us in the live chat, looked over some of the notes that we have. I know I spent way too long talking about the Twitter feuds, which we're up to 6 notifications on at this point. And I spent way too long talking about Pete Buttigieg as well. But we'll be back here tomorrow. We will look into the news that's happening elsewhere in the world. We'll probably, unfortunately, at some point we're going to have to talk about the Mar-a-Lago thing and the Special Master. I don't want to, and I've been avoiding it as much as I can because we should be focusing right now on the disastrous Biden administration and making sure people remember that, and it comes up to November. But, you know, our friends to the left keep wanting to throw more spaghetti at the wall when it comes to Trump. So at some point we're going to have to talk about it. But I'm going to filibuster away from it as long as I can. But for that, we're going to head out of here for the day. Thanks everybody who came by and chatted. We are going ratings, so stick around if you're over on Twitch. We will see you here next time for more contemporary. Definitely looking forward to it. Definitely looking forward to seeing more of you guys here. Love seeing you guys. Love hanging out with you guys. Love seeing your chats every day. And until tomorrow, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.